It's good to catch up with you again.
I know, I miss you.
It's been a while. I'm very excited about sharing this space and time with you. So, my friend Rebecca, who also runs that I've Boudica Instagram page, has joined me to kind of speak about the wonders that Boudica represents and what we can bring into our everyday life in the present moment from the past. First of all, please, Rebecca, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm American, but I've lived in Colchester for 23 years. And I'm currently a master's student in gender and sexuality, and a practicing artist. And I started Eye of Boudica about 4 years ago as a sort of way to stand up to the shocking amount of street harassment that students I was working with at the time were experiencing. And then that sort of married with my 20 plus year long obsession with Boudica the Warrior Queen. Um, so yeah, that's me.
I love that. It is an obsession because even when I've spoken with you before, I didn't really know that much about her. Um, and you, especially not even necessarily being from here, and you're still like, you can whip up all this information. So, story time. Who is Boudica?
Right. Okay. So Boudica was they wouldn't necessarily, was reading this the other day, they wouldn't necessarily have referred to her as a queen, but women could hold titles and lands. For all intents and purposes, yes, she was a sovereign. Her husband, and this was during the Roman invasion, Rome invaded, uh, well, Colchester, sort of 43 AD-ish. Very similar to what happened to Native Americans with colonization. It was colonization, basically. And Boudica's husband, Pursuitigus, left her and their daughters, to inherit the lands, the title of sovereign, all of that. And Rome didn't like that because in Roman society, women were nothing, basically. They couldn't inherit. And so, to make a statement, the Roman army had her flogged within an inch of her life, barely, brutally raped her daughters, gang raped them, even invited their slaves to have a go, which in itself is disgusting, but because they were considered royalty, they may have been considered tainted after that. So it's like trying to just completely wipe out her line, basically. And so she recovered and she was like, okay, enough of this. And it was very common for women, Celtic women, to be strong warriors. She managed to unite three of the Celtic tribes in East Anglia, which were the Iceni, the Trinovantes, and oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't think of the third one. That's so not like me. I did have a heavy lecture this afternoon. So anyway, she sacked three cities. She sacked Colchester, she sacked London, and she sacked St. Albans. Something about her death toll being somewhere around 170,000 Romans. She was defeated, but and because so little, they're still finding archaeological evidence to try and piece together the bits of the story. One theory is that to avoid capture, she poisoned herself with hemlock, and she ended it on her own terms. Um, and is also, I think I read something recently, there's theories that one of the daughters survived after that. So in the end, Rome won, but talk about the ultimate stand up to harassment campaign. She,
100%. And also, I'm
yeah,
just thinking like, just this image of women, that's not how we perceive women, especially
no,
historical women. So, like, just the power,
the
the
fierceness, the
yeah,
strength.
yeah, just that, just well, I can't even comprehend it. I can't put words to it because I feel that there aren't so many examples of that to be able to overthrow the human empire, the Roman Empire. Yeah, okay, go on, go on.
She made a good dent, for a
Yes.
while. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, I mean, there's still archaeological evidence in Colchester. I literally live just outside of the what they call the Circle of Boudican Ash. So if you like around, I think it's about 18 inches below the soil in the city center, there's still a layer of it looks like sort of terracotta and everything, and it is the ash, the destruction. She burned it to the ground. She had people trapped because where the castle is now is built on the foundations of the Temple of Claudius. So
Mhm.
she had people trapped in there for 3 days. They laid siege to the temple for 3 days. And I mean, there's a darkness to this because sadly, Colchester, the majority of Romans here were retired soldiers or, people of wealth that was like, oh, you've done your bit here, go have this piece of land that we have taken for you. And there was a lot of darkness in that, there were a lot of innocence and everything. And I liked it recently. I like to sort of think of that as representing the shadow side, the shadow work that we do, the darkness that we have in all of us. That's a sidebar. But anyway, yeah, 3 days she laid siege and finally burned it. Um, and then she went on to London and then
And
to,
that's that rage, isn't it? It's that
yes,
force that might like enough. This is where I draw the line. But to have that success, so to say, yeah, I definitely hear you. Like I'm not into fighting violence with violence, or burning whole places down. But what that represents, the power of that, and to do it in more than one place is big. Is big.
it's huge. It is huge, especially, yeah, when you think about, well, I mean, it was Iron Age, so they would have known how to make weapons.
Mhm.
But if you think of the time and just the physical strength that that would have entailed,
Yeah. The mental load, dare
I
I say,
mean, the
the
mental
mental
load is,
load.
yeah, but the physical strength, yeah. Um, so she was a very powerful figure, and she was a leader. People followed her. And also all of these other tribes, it was very much like colonization in the US to indigenous people is like, well, we're going to take all this land and then we're going to lease it back to you. You have to pay us to work the land that your ancestors that belongs to you, to your bloodline, your blood, sweat, and tears. But no, you can pay us to work it for us. And that was a huge part of the revolt. That I mean, it was the flogging and the raping of the daughters that tipped her over the edge, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is also the way that you said potentially life came to an end. I feel there was something like that with Cleopatra. There was maybe
The
the,
asp.
like, yeah, taking something, I will take my own life because you're not going to take that from me as well. So, yeah, I mean, we do have powerful women in history, but yeah, underrepresented for sure.
Oh gosh, yes. History is always written by the victors, which are usually old dead white men.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
So, with that, then, how does Boudica influence the work that you do?
For me, and this is, I think I couldn't put my finger on, well, I could. I mean, I always identify with rebellious, strong female figures. But delving deeper through the course of my art practice and just life, I just think for me, she is a voice for the voiceless. She is a voice for the marginalized. Is when she's what happens when you push someone so far. And that I think thinking about that and having like, the history of, bad relationships or just all these things that we have been taught are norms through a patriarchal lens. To me, she is just a symbol that just sort of stands up and says, no, this, I'm going to burn it to the ground and do it my way. And I don't think I'm alone in wanting that kind of a figure. I think women, femme identifying people, marginalized people, I think, and especially women, because of the statistics of violence against women by cis men, I think every woman wants that sort of like that hero, that heroine, or has that part in her that thinks, God, I just want to, stand up and say no, no, and just set it all on fire.
This is interesting because it's making me think about the innate rage that lives inside all of us. But
Mm.
I feel that that rage has been suppressed, that rage that is able to birth life into this world when harnessed, but it's been suppressed. It's been silenced.
Oh, has it ever? Yeah, I mean, women, the cis female body represents a huge threat. It represents mystery. It represents power to bring new life. It represents connection to the earth and to the elements. I mean, why do you think we were burned as witches for so many years?
Mm.
It's all a threat. And that was why women's bodies, all of a sudden it became important to medicalize women's bodies. We didn't need men doctors telling us how to give birth. We were doing that, helping each other with this stuff. You know what I mean? Um, it's all of that. It's just means of containing, suppressing a threat. The patriarchal cultures that operate in a hard binary, that it's us versus them. It's, it's just one opposite. It's extreme opposites. And if you find in indigenous cultures, such as the Iceni or, even in native, that isn't how things work.
Mm.
It doesn't, it's not us versus them. And I don't even want to say spectrum because that's limiting. It implies a beginning and an end. Think of it like stars and planets, each one in their own atmosphere, each one in their own orbit, each one doing their own thing. They're all different, but they're all connected, you
Well, I
know?
think there's something in that like the human experience, we're not separate from nature, we are nature. And in some
Exactly.
way, my head always thinks of like Avatar or Pocahontas speaking to the rocks and the otters, that like we are all interconnected. And as uncomfortable as it is, somehow, I think there is a connection between good and bad, between right and wrong, between the Roman Empire and Boudica. And it's not that we need to tolerate our abusers, because that's not okay. I think there was definitely a lot of violence historically, and I think there's still a lot of violence that happens now. But there's a discomfort in accepting, and you mentioned earlier, like the shadow parts of us. It's unpleasant. It's not nice to think that there's some shadowy parts of us. But my mind's now thinking about the cis white men that have the power, and that they're, especially a lot of the stuff in the media at the minute, that these cis white men are just like, we're being protective of women and girls, and they're the ones that have got a history of grooming or involved in pedophilia, or doing
I know,
terrible
protecting us
things.
from what? You?
Yeah, exactly. And it's
Our
just
only
like,
natural predator.
read the room. But yeah, I don't know if you can speak to that, because I think when we acknowledge that we are nature, that means that we have destruction and we also have birth. And I think there's something in um, the divine feminine and being able to hold both the rage, the transformation, the finding the beauty in the chaos. But yeah,
And the
speak to that.
death and the rebirth.
Yeah.
As women, we die and are reborn several times throughout the cycles of our lives. And we're one of the few species on Earth that have a menopausal period, and that period exists in order to pass the wisdom down to the younger generation, which again is a threat. And also, it's reflected in just only recently that it's really starting to be talked about in medicine, really starting to be explored and researched. So, yeah, it's centuries of rage.
And it's been so suppressed. Um, uh, so I mentioned earlier before when we were speaking, just catching up, this for me, I think this rise since the Me Too movement, but I don't know how you see it, how the lens is for you, that that fight for feminism has always existed, that brought so much to the mainstream, and everyone started to talk about it. But now I feel like we're in the post Me Too movement, and there's this friction, and I think there was always friction anyway with feminism being misunderstood. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Where are we? Where have we been, and where are we going?
Oh, this is tricky. If you look at it from a like the global north sort of Western perspective, I think I'd like to think it's an extinction burst. I'd like to think that this is something that happens when, a way of thinking or knowing or a species is about to go extinct. It's the equivalent of a mass tantrum, throwing the toys out of the pram, which you're seeing as this massive resurgence in right-wing politics, more control of women's bodies, Roe v. Wade being overturned, loads of different things. US wanting to ban TikTok. The US is basically becoming, it's falling, it's becoming a dictatorship, let's be honest. I would like to hope that that's an extinction burst, that that's like, you know, the mess before, don't want to say revolution because I think that's sort of cheesy, but before the change, before we go back to that ancient wisdom of it takes a village. We
Mm.
aren't meant to see each other as the competition. It's there's things, like they're sort of like I was talking about that Western colonial conquer, slave owner, slave, all of that, those extreme opposites, those extreme binaries. They haven't gotten us they've not done us any favors so far, have they? I mean, I'd like to think that this is sort of the end of that or coming to the end of that. And yeah, I think Me Too was really important in terms of women having a voice and saying it. I think it was really brave for them to come out and say, this happened, this is not cool. Um, I also I'm also very aware that it was a very white uh movement, and that concerns me because I know it takes, somebody had to break through that glass ceiling. Sadly, why is it always white women? We've still got so far to go. And if not to compare, I don't know if it's the right way to say this, compare, but think about what the challenges that women of color face compared to even just those women from the Me Too movement. It's yeah, it's just it's like, yeah, we've done this, this is amazing, but there's so much more to do. And also, I think I'd love to think that Me Too was just one burst. Everyone's taking a step back, taking a deep breath, gathering their strength, hopefully linking arms with other people and think, right, let's hit this again. I hope.
Yeah, I think there's a lot where we're at now. I feel like is a microcosm, if like as the big scale of humanity. And when we look at it, we just think that this is where we are. But actually, as you've just kind of pointed out, that it is a journey, but it where we're heading also this idea of a restart is making me think of like the Big Bang and
Yeah.
really, humans have existed for however long. We've not actually been on the planet for that long to get everything right, but we've
Yeah.
got a chance. We've had a good run. I've gone, right, let's not do it like that. So I wonder if there's any insight and wisdom that we can pull from the past that can help build a better future, rather than thinking, right, back to the drawing board, where shall we start? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because you've mentioned about indigenous cultures and
Loads of indigenous wisdom about that.
go on, share.
Loads. We don't own the earth. We are custodians.
Mhm.
We are guardians. We are part of it. It's like, the Native American Chief Seattle, that said, man did not create the web. He is merely a thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. Nature is not something to be lorded over. Um, I think that right there summarizes what we have to learn from this, is it does community is the only way forward. I think this intense opposition, all of that, it's a myth. It doesn't accomplish anything. Nothing worthwhile, nothing long lasting, nothing sustainable. It's not sustainable.
And it's a great distraction from actually the real problems.
Oh God, yeah. So much easier to get caught up in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That table tennis kind of
Yeah,
game.
he said, and then it's just perpetuating the violence that we're experiencing. And I think that there's some underlying thread that I get from this as well, that harm that's been done to the planet is also the harm of power and control and abuse and male violence
Yes.
as well that we're experiencing. That thread that runs through is just. I heard this study that transcendental meditation was done in certain areas, and they got huge groups of people to meditate in some place in America. And this was, I don't know, the 70s or 80s, Google it. And it was saying that all crime went down. like street violence, like Grand Theft Auto went down, theft went down, everything went down except sexual assault. And it's like there's something deep rooted. I'm not saying that just meditating or a town of people meditating is going to fix the world problems, but there's something in that. I think energetically with everything being connected, like we're saying. But it's like this, it's so deep. It's this thread runs so deep. And yeah, I don't know where it comes from, and I'm fascinated by it, and I can't put my finger on it. And I feel like we see it all the time in stories that come out. Um, but what is that? What and historically, Boudica and beyond, before all of that as well. Like, what is this deep-rooted need to harm people in this way, power and control? Yeah, I'm not sure your thoughts on that.
It's really interesting, in especially thinking about the sexual assault that didn't go down. I have several thoughts on this. I think that sense of entitlement to women's bodies, or those weaker, perceived as weaker, is so ingrained, so ingrained. You see it in the smallest examples. Male entitlement, like, for example, I don't, this isn't to do with sexual assault, this is to do with entitlement. I was walking down the high street with a friend of mine who has like a 4 or 5 year old little girl, and this group of little boys, like, she went to, I don't know, look at something or reach for something, and they just plowed right past her. Not excuse me, nothing. That's just a micro.
Yeah.
And they were like 5. I was like, okay, you're acting this entitled now.
Yeah.
What are you going to be like when you're 18? That's one thread. The other idea is that it's something very animalistic and primeval, like, a caveman, if they were to confront another, like, sort of, you know, a species they didn't recognize, similar to man, whatever, their first reaction would be to smack it on the head. Is
Mhm.
it that? Are we that animal? Surely not anymore. Maybe it is.
That's interesting because I think this like some people would say, or they'd argue why they'd argue against this, that there's this animalistic instinct within us to want sex or whatever. It's like, but we are humans and we are developed species, so we get to choose how we respond to stuff. We get to choose how we behave. But I think some people find that very difficult, very challenging. But I think you're right. It is this animalistic, threatening
That's part of
behavior.
it, but then I also think a lot of it is the other side, is that entitlement.
Mm,
That, and I'm sorry, it is very cis male. It
yeah.
still is in 2025.
It's
It's
not
still
your fault.
very,
You don't need to apologize.
no, it's still very much that entitlement. We were talking about one of something the other day in one of my lectures about this, as well, about that. If you look at, things like early psychoanalysis, Freud, all of that, sort of the beginning of, I don't know, I think it's not enlightenment because it's post-enlightenment. Anyway, if you look at all that stuff, all of these things look at the family unit through the patriarchal model. I think that and the concept of traditional patriarchal relationships, I think that has done thousands of years of damage, probably. Well, not thousands, hundreds anyway. I think start there as well. That's another.
Yeah, that's so true because if the history that we're receiving, if the lens of which we use to look at the world is from the patriarchal angle, then we're missing out on the matriarchal angle or, anything else, any other way of perceiving the world. We're already coming from this.
Communal angle. We're missing
Yeah.
that. We're completely missing the community. It
Yeah.
takes community. Yeah, the patriarchal lens is, yeah, it's just done so much damage. Everything we read, the majority of what we read in history books, all of that stuff, all written by patriarchy. Like we were saying, yeah. And those concepts of patriarchal relationships, it's about ownership, it's about possession. Again, we can't own the earth. Why should we be able to own other humans?
Yes.
in my opinion.
Well, no, in the
In my
human.
humble opinion.
Okay, so with the course that you're studying, not the course that you're studying, tell me the title of it again.
It's a master's degree in gender and sexuality.
Yes, within that. It's not just like some free online course. Um, you mentioned about the element of indigenous cultures and indigenous practices that you look at through that as well. So, you have any examples that you can share about just another way that we can look at the world that's not through the patriarchal lens, because it does exist. It has forever.
Um, well, that's my area of interest is being Native American heritage. Um, I just excuse me, I just feel magnetically drawn to know. But an example is that we don't own the earth. We are custodians of the earth. We are not meant to stay in one place, like being herded onto reservations, all of that. No, 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 no. We move with the seasons. We follow the game. We follow, you know what I mean? And it's that's one example. And there are also loads of stories about like our native legends throughout different tribes. um, a lot of our higher powers are female. There's Grandmother Spider. There's Sky Woman who fell to the earth and populated the earth with all plants and living things. And those concepts are still honored in indigenous traditions. Yeah, it's very, I don't want to say female centric because indigenous, sexuality and gender wouldn't, you just, it wouldn't have been a big deal. You are what you are. You are who you are. Um, and you sort of caught me off guard. I don't have any of my native stories in front of me right now, so I'm not able to recall the details. My head's in Boudica lands.
That's okay. We're bringing them together.
Yeah, we are.
I think there's something about, like you just shared about the goddesses and these deities. And so I think there's something about, if we've been looking at the world through a patriarchal lens for far too long, what would it look like to reintroduce or to, you know, turn to more, pivot towards this divine feminine, or whatever's the best way to describe it? Like, what does that look like if there's a way to perceive the future from looking at our history?
Way too. Okay, I might
Is
need you to
there a
re.
way that this all gets better, or is this how it is?
Oh God, that's so depressing to think. I would like to think that this is going to get better based on, I just sort of feel like this sort of rising vibration, happening around the world. See it through social media, see it, you know, at university campuses, obviously, centers of thought, things like that. I would like to think that, yeah, we're on the cusp of change. I really hope. Um, I really hope. This is, yeah. I'm sorry, I've already forgotten the first part of that. What was the first part of that question?
No, you're fine. It was just exploring the if there's anything from the past that will help us move in towards shaping the future, if things, practices that we can use and tools or deities and the goddesses.
Oh gosh, yes. See who resonates with you. If you don't know where to start, think about your heritage. Think about maybe, look, we were talking about this in the group that I was in last night about how Christianity is responsible for erasing a lot of that. Like, look into Lilith, have a look at that. And it's newer Christianity, it's not necessarily all Christianity. Um, there was even a point where Protestants were saying that the Catholic Church was too sexy because of the art that Michelangelo and everything was producing. It's like, okay, riddle me that one. Um, so yeah, start there. Research something. Find somebody in history that you identify with. Look into their culture. Look into what fired them. For me, like growing up, I knew, a few of the Native American spirits. I knew the tricksters, and they were based on, wildlife characters from my tribe. I think I shared that with you on the Sugar Moon. But talking, like looking into Boudica and things like that, I wanted to know what inspired her, what was her culture, what was her religion, what fired her, and a lot of it is the people, they, it's really interesting because I always talk about power from place, but native cultures, indigenous cultures always talk about how sacred the land is where they are born because they know that they are part of it. They have come from it and they know how to care for it and sustain it. And I think that's why power from place, oh, she's got goosebumps, resonates so much with me. It's like, and that was another part of Boudica's fight, was her lands were taken from her and her people and her neighbors. It's, think about that. What connects you to where you are? And I'm really lucky. I think I'm not from here, but that's given me a connection to here. And it's something I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's something that's passed down through generations of native peoples, but I can go someplace and I can connect to the land. I've been places where I think I've been here before, and of course I haven't. But it's like I feel something in this.
There's a familiarity to it, to a place.
Yeah,
It's
like an
like an old
ancient familiarity.
grandparent. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's visiting the family. That's really interesting what you shared. It's making me think that just what you touched on earlier about all the witches that died, and I think it was only in recent years that I realized or was trying to comprehend what went down. Like I'd have been burnt for lighting some incense and having crystals. What? And I think, around the Colchester area, there's a lot of history there. But I, again, it's easy to disassociate ourselves from what happened. But that was actual people with actual lives that were going about their business, and someone coming along saying you're wrong and wiping out so many people, but also so much knowledge. And I think that's why I feel there's uh, a rediscovery that people are going on to learn about herbalism, to learn about
yes.
growing their own and coming back to the land and seasons and cyclical living and getting a bit witchy. But actually, I think it is where we get our innate wisdom from for the human experience.
Yes, it is. And you've just hit the nail right on the head. There is a lot of people going back to nature, actually thinking, I need to nurture this because this nurtures me. This is a symbiotic relationship. Neither one of us owns the other. And we were doing, like, we was doing a reading in one of my courses about the capitalist gaze as an extractive gaze. Capitalist gaze will look at a forest and think timber, money. They're not, and then they'll just clear cut it. They're not thinking about all of the other ecosystems underneath in that soil, all of the microorganisms, that knock-on effect that they're creating right there. It's an extractive gaze. And that is what has destroyed the planet, but it's also what has destroyed us as people. And I think that's another reason for the sexual violence, is entitled cis men will look at a woman and think, what can I get from her? It's extractive.
Exploitation. Yes.
Yeah.
Deep. This is deep.
This is my world at the moment. But yeah, there's so many parallels about the extractive zone and the capitalist gaze. I'm doing a paper right now about how neurodivergence mirrors indigenous culture and how, in order to fit the capitalist gaze, I have to mask to fit the capitalist gaze to navigate through my
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So,
And the thing that I always come back to is just like I have to work to earn money to be able to afford to eat and have a roof over my head, all these little details. And it's just like I didn't sign up to this. Give
yes,
me a
exactly.
field. Give me a field and some hay and let me
Yeah.
figure this stuff out.
And you learn that lesson from nature too, like in indigenous agriculture, the three sisters,
Go on, who are
squash,
the three
corn,
sisters?
squash, corn, and beans. You grow them together because the squash grows low to the ground, right? The corn grows tall. The beans climb the corn and they create enough shade at the right spots for the squash or pumpkin to grow on the ground. And the leaves of the pumpkin keep the moisture in the soil that feeds all three. It's symbiotic.
It's
The
the
three
holy,
sisters. The power of three.
yeah, holy divinity. Wow.
There's an example of what we can learn from the past.
Yeah. It's so powerful, and I think it's difficult for people to imagine going. It would be like going back to live a life like that. What are you going to do? Live outside in a shack when, we've got like 4G, 5G internet that we use to communicate these days.
I know.
Difficult to see how those two worlds merge, but it's interesting to consider how things from the past could be introduced, reintroduced, or yeah, utilized to be able to build a sustainable world that is inclusive, that is caring and considerate and heart-led, without sounding like a complete hippie, but it is,
Well,
isn't it? Because
there's wisdom in
without the
that.
heartbeat, none of us exist
Exactly.
and we wouldn't be here. So it is,
That was the story of the strawberry moon, is it's called the heartberry.
yeah.
And Sky Woman uh had a daughter who died in childbirth. When they buried her, the strawberry sprung from where her heart was. You know how strawberries put out runners, shoots. That was her body putting out all of the different, and it's also the heart connecting to all the different organs and parts of the body. So loads of ancient wisdom there. And yeah,
So you
I'll
got
send
lots
you,
in
it's
the
a good
Bible.
story. It's a heartbreaking story, but it's beautiful. You'd love it.
Yeah, I'm here for this. Okay, so with regards to empowered women like Boudica, and given what you mentioned before about the sort of work that you do, I wondered if you've got any examples or ways in which that people can introduce empowerment or lean into empowerment in their everyday life, either personally or in a public space. Have you got anything that people can use, any tools?
I started really simple because and it's been a long, slow progression for me to even get to the point where I could think of something like I have Boudica just because of past abuses, relationships, as you say, groomed by the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Took me a long time. It takes a lot of work. Start with something small and congratulate yourself. For example, and this might be too much for some people, I'm lucky I'm a tall woman. But when I'm walking down the pavement and there are a group of men coming towards me, I'm not moving. They can move around me. And I know that might be a lot for some people. But, if you try to squeeze past a man somewhere, don't say be like, oh, sorry, sorry, excuse me. Say, excuse me, coming through. Take
Mhm.
up space. Even if it's just a little bit. Even if you're on the train and there's some guy with man spread, just be like, excuse me, do you mind?
Mhm.
Just small and congratulate yourself. Write a list. Today I didn't move out of the way of these people. Today I said no thank you. Yeah, baby steps.
And not apologizing. I think that's such a
Oh my
huge
God.
thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I exist was literally like a thing I used to tell myself. My existence is an inconvenience to all other people. Like, why do I feel that way about myself? It is the messages that I'm receiving. So yeah, even just starting with that, not saying sorry. Yeah, I love that.
Keep track too. I started doing that. I started keeping track of how many times, especially since I met you, how many times a day I would say sorry or start a sentence with sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then just be
ridiculous.
like, mm-mm.
What are you apologizing for?
I
What
know. Why am I apologizing? Huh?
It's interesting because some people, some countries, I'm sure they don't have the word for please. And I feel that, and that even to some degree, maybe even sorry, it's just like I don't need to like it's implied. Of course, if I hurt you or something, but I'm not doing that. I'm just communicating with you. I'm just walking past you or whatever the thing is. But this mentality of just like, yeah, shrink and just apologize for existing.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is I used to find myself shrinking and slouching, and then I would catch my reflection in shop windows, and I've really been practicing it harder. It's like shoulders back, head up. Even if you can do that.
Tits out.
Yep. Tits and teeth. But no, shoulders back, head up.
Mhm. And I think it's so true what you said of just like appreciating yourself when you're doing this, like saying giving yourself a pat on the back, like well done, you did it. Even if just you had the thought in your head to do it, but you didn't actually do it. Well, at least you're doing this, like exposure therapy. At least I'm like, this is a thing where I could do the thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm thinking of it. At least it's
yeah,
on my radar.
yeah,
And maybe I didn't do it today, but if I think about it more, maybe
yeah.
I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think even just from a physiological point of view, like, yeah, tits and teeth, this position that we hold our body, it changes where our heart sits in our body. It changes our
Oh, yeah.
ability to be able to communicate and project our voice in the same way that Boudica was probably not hunched over and like all up in a corner. It's an
Not a
empowered,
bit.
yeah, it's a really powerful thing to just explore that even if you're on your own. But it also talk about the mental load.
Oh, that's a whole other study about it's called Women's Work, about how we expend something like 70% more energy per day than men just by risk assessing every step we take and planning everything we do.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
exhausting. It's tiring.
Ah, yeah, it is knackering when you stop and think about all you do. And
Yeah.
that's another thing is I have consciously tried to reduce my 70%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. How's that going?
Yeah. Pretty well, actually. Pretty well. Yep. hmm And I know it's risky. I know it's risky in the world that we live in to say, I am going to take that short walk at night by myself because I know where I'm going and I know where I live and I know where, you know, and I know that's risky. I'm not telling people to do that by any means, but I'm I'm at the point, and I think a lot of people are, it's like, I'm tired of living in a box that was built for me that I didn't ask for.
Yeah.
And so me being a middle-aged, relatively strong woman, I think I'm all right to take the odd chance. I'll take my chances.
Yeah. It's mad that it's even like that, but it's making me think of this one activity I like to do when teaching sex ed, that it's like squad goals. So imagining your like imaginary friends. Bear with me. Because when you walk as if you are part of a squad and you hold yourself with your head higher, and you can even just make believe this fantasy that you are okay, or like a cloak of protection wrapped around you.
Yeah.
Do you put yourself in risky positions? No, that's not what I'm saying. Do you go out of your way to put yourself in risk and be like, come on then, bring it on? That's not what I'm saying.
No, neither am I.
But
Just,
but
but
to
yeah,
embody how it feels, to feel empowered, to feel supported, to feel safe, just embodying that and practicing that, whether on your own or in a public space, I think it can do all sorts of things for the nervous system because it gives us a break to be able to pause that feeling of not feeling safe. But again, it takes work. It is effort to be able to choose how we show up in the world.
it is. It is. And in practice.
And practice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. It gets easier with time, but it is a practice. Yeah. Um, okay. Have you got any insight or wisdom? I just feel now like asking if you could just channel Boudica. Does she have a message for us?
Well, it's funny you say that because I got this excerpt from the book that I was reading from last night that uh this really resonates with me and it really resonated with some other people. Um Andraste, although little is known about her directly, is associated with victory through her link with Boudica. She is a warrior goddess for women, but also for all people, as Boudica was a warrior queen for all Celts. Together they teach us how to turn rage into paradigm-shifting actions. From them, we learn to stand in sovereignty, even when our legs are shaking. That's, yeah, that pretty much sums up my obsession journey with her.
Even what's the last line? Because I'm just stuck on that, even when our legs are shaking, because that's such a
Oh,
literal thing that I
isn't
can
it?
remember like the bullies at school saying something, my legs shaking, my heart's racing, and
Same.
being like, oh my God, what
Uh,
is this? But yeah, the sovereignty. Woo.
yeah, from them we learn to stand in sovereignty even when our legs are shaking.
Yes.
That's it. I
She has
think
spoken. Boudica has spoken.
I think the queen has is present
Yeah.
tonight. Um,
And I also
yeah.
just on that, I love the idea that she just sat like on your sofa or on the bed here, just like with a cocktail or something, going, all right, ladies, how's it
Yeah,
going? Like it's been a while. Maybe that's just my interpretation of her. Yeah.
totally. Yeah. I get it. I feel that too. But yeah, I still work with her in my art and in my brain, and I always used to joke and say I'm starting a cult, but there are worse examples to follow.
This is so true. That is so true. Yeah, it's there's something really powerful in that, and I think my advocacy for pleasure is about cultivate space and time in your life to experience pleasure despite what pain you have gone through, despite the pain, despite the trauma. And
And
I
I've
think
told so many people about you.
that
Oh, no, seriously, my classmates, like, they're like, oh, we need to meet her. We need to talk to her about everything.
Oh, I love this. But yeah, anything about pleasure. I think pleasure lives within all of us, but sometimes it's difficult to access. But that's where I got to, like experiencing trauma or pain or grief or whatever the thing is, can be heart-wrenchingly painful and make us sick and all sorts of things. But that doesn't take away from our ability to experience pleasure. And I think there's something about this, for me, it's coming back to honoring our divinity, this act of self-worship, making time to recognize that you are a queen, and this standing in your sovereignty, despite maybe your legs are shaking, despite that maybe anxiety is in your stomach or in your chest and it's uncomfortable, but inviting that sense of sovereignty in, I think that's the reality. Boudica wasn't doing all that fighting and violence from a place of like peace. It had a rage in it. And there's something to get ragey, feel the feelings because we're suppressing.
Yeah.
I think that's what causes inflammation and it makes people sick.
Oh, does it? Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. It does. I agree with you on that. But yeah,
Uh,
I think embrace that. Doesn't mean you're going to go out and raise a city to the ground.
yeah,
It just means you might tell the creepy guy at the bar that grabs your waist as a means of passing by you that that's not acceptable. You don't need to touch me to get past me,
yeah,
you know? And
yeah,
stand in it.
yeah.
Even that took practice. That took me years to be able to say, yeah,
No, it's not okay. It's not
it's not.
okay.
You don't need to touch me to get past
No.
me.
Mm-mm, mm-mm, no.
I'm good.
Have you got any final thoughts or reflections or things that you'd like to share before we start to wrap up?
I'm just really, really grateful that we got to talk about that, like going back to ancient ways, ancient feminine wisdom, fluid wisdom, whatever. I think it's a huge way forward. And I'm really happy I got to share that. And I think, I don't know, you're making me feel, yeah, all these ideas artistically, everything else. I just think this is the way I think to fix, or not fix, but to improve things, is to tap back into that stuff and to focus on not us versus them, but us together. We together. We are.
Stronger United.
I know. It's, yeah. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah, gave me a lot to made my cogs turn again. And that's
Yeah.
impressive after this afternoon's lecture.
No, I really appreciate it. And I think for me, I'm kind of left with this vision of standing on a hill. And it's quite funny because when you say Iceni, when I used to go to illegal raves in the woods, there was one place in Iceni village. So I have this thing to tap into, but that's another story for another day. But
That
I,
one that I want to hear though.
yeah, but I can just have this visual of, like you said, like standing arm in arm, this linked up together, an army of people united, and not from a place of violence and not from a place of defense, but from a place of like standing in our worth and sovereignty. There's something really powerful, and that's what I think this season feels like. Like, I'm done being defensive. I'm done having to explain myself, having to figure my stuff out. And despite all that, continue to show up and exist in this world. Like, how about we just be for a bit, but recognize we're linked, arm in arm, connected with this force, that with a group of people that get it.
Yeah,
All
I
is
think
happily ever after.
what yeah, it's stop with the constant protect versus defend,
Yeah,
and and dominate, submit,
yeah,
give, take. No, what can we share
yeah,
to
yeah.
benefit all?
Yeah. And I think more and more people are looking that more and more people are looking for community. I feel like it's 2004, like we've gone back some time and I just want to go to some youth club or something. It's that there's, when you speak to your mates on the phone for hours and hours and hours, or, just this life before this isolation of staring into a device. And I think, yeah, picnics, coming together, connecting, sharing stories, and recognizing what's alive in us is so vital and important. And I think, yeah, the from what I know you've done previously and connecting with people and like you said, power from place, is that how you say
Yeah,
it? Um, to be able to walk the land on which Boudica's ash exists is there's a lot of power there, right?
I envision every day that I draw power through the soles of my feet by walking over that. But I've been doing that for years. That is, yeah, goes right up through me.
Beautiful. Well, I think that's a lovely way to end. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Where can people find you if they want to learn more about Boudica and the stuff that you're doing?
Well, I'm a little busy with the studies at the moment, but the studies are I'm in that the studies are feeding this incubation period where I think like Boudica is going to have another massive rebirth when I get space. But just for basic stuff, Instagram, Facebook. But again, I'm a bit immersed in the incubation phase. So if you need to
Absolutely.
reach out, if you want to just talk, DM me on Instagram. All of this stuff is in the process of a huge new revolution. So bear with whilst we incubate. But if you want to talk about these things, yeah, DM me on Instagram. We can exchange emails, anything like that.
Awesome. That's Eye of Boudica. Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it took time for Boudica to do all the planning. It doesn't happen overnight. And in incubation period, I think is such a good, yeah, visual. It takes time for that seed to germinate, and I'm excited for the rebrand, the relaunch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be more of a um it's a collective now, and it will be more of a way of thinking, a way of being, a new a form of community.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be a spiritual and artistic element to that as well. And it will be underpinned by a lot of research that I'm doing at the moment and will continue to do. But I think I know that's the right path, and she's with me, and she can be with you too.
All right. See you later, Boudica. Thank you, Rebecca, for your time.
You.
I'm off to get some cocktails for Boudica now. But
Yes.
yeah, I
Yes.
appreciate your time and thank you for the work that you do and the inspiration and the warmth and empowerment that you offer people as well by not necessarily channeling Boudica, but bringing that awareness and knowledge of such a heroine back into the present day. So thank you for you.
Thank you for you.